Welcome to Your Story Isn't Over, a podcast about hope in Jesus. Here's our host, pastor and author, Kyle Dunn.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Christie Taylor. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for lots of people to hear your story, and let's just dive right in.
Okay.
So start from the beginning.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Alabama, very small town. Went to the same church my whole life. Till I moved here.
Right.
Same school, class with all the same kids all the way through.
How many people did you graduate with? How small of a school?
Well, that was about 230.
Okay.
So it's not like teeny-tiny.
Right.
But around here, that would be considered like teeny-tiny.
So South Alabama.
Yes.
What kind of things were you into as a kid? What was little girl Christie like?
Little girl Christie was very shy when I was out and about. But when I was at home, I was very bossy. And I was like wanting to be teacher and, just bossing all my brothers and my sister around. So
right.
I enjoyed playing by myself because them three would get me in trouble.
Okay.
So, but little Christie was very quiet outside of the home.
Okay. All right.
But very inside the house.
Yeah. Do you think that was sort of like natural leadership in you?
I do think that could be.
Yeah.
I do think that could be something the Lord. Yeah, maybe so.
Cool. Siblings?
Yes, I did have two other brothers. They have both passed.
Oh,
we can talk about
that
a little bit. And then my younger sister, April.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So I was 3.
Wow.
I was number 3 in the line. So I'm middle child, but first girl.
Okay.
And April and I are only like 16 months apart.
Yeah.
So I've always told her, you like stole my time from me. Like, I don't even remember my life without her, which is wonderful now, but we've just always joked about
Which
that.
is why you probably had to get a little loud at home and be bossy, because
a little bit loud.
There she was taking your attention.
That is so true. That's true.
What kind of things did your family do, or what was family life like?
That is a little bit of a tough one. My oldest brother was a special needs.
Okay.
He had epilepsy, some learning disabilities, and just struggled.
Wow.
So really, he took a lot of mom and dad's attention and time. And we were all very close together. It was like, 2 years between most of us I'm sorry, I'm adjusting my headphones here. And so it did seem like we were all trying to vie for attention.
Yeah.
And just like any family, there is abuse, neglect, there's addiction, issues that happen. And that was kind of within my family of origin, but also the extended family.
Okay.
So
there's a lot
tough,
there.
Yeah. I had a tough, it was tough.
Okay. All right.
It was tough.
So getting out of the house, going to school or other places, that kind of thing, was that sort of a welcomed?
It was. I loved school. I would cry if the school bus was late. I was that kid.
Wow.
My brothers and my sister were like, don't call Paw. I'd call my grandfather if the bus was running late so he could come get us and get me to school. Because I liked that, I knew what to expect when I got there, and I felt like I could excel in that.
Yeah.
And it just kind of got me out of what I look back now, and it just felt kind of chaotic.
Okay. So home, I'm asking words. These aren't your words. They're mine. But
sure.
Was home not a happy place?
It was at times.
Okay.
There was just a lot of hard.
Yeah.
It was a lot of hard things. Yeah. It was a lot of scary things. My parents married very young.
Okay.
They had my oldest brother and his twin in Panama. My dad got drafted.
Okay.
So they ended up in Panama, and they're in Panama. My mom doesn't even know she's pregnant with twins. One of the twins is stillborn when she does give birth.
Oh, man.
And my oldest brother, his name was Jason, almost died during that. So I cannot even imagine what that did to them.
Yeah, the challenges that
yes.
stayed with them
Yes.
along the way.
Yeah.
You know, just by the way, I just want to affirm and encourage how much the Lord is shining through just even the way you talk about it. In looking for, with compassion, for understanding of what shaped them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
for how that shaped their home and stuff. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That
Thank
God's
you for
working
saying
in your
that.
heart.
And he has had to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise you might become bitter, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Jason, this older brother, how old were you when he passed?
I was 18.
Okay.
He was 23.
Okay.
That was a very hard day. It was in 1995. I woke to my mother screaming. And I ran downstairs and I looked at him. He was in his bed and I knew he had been gone for a while. And my mom was standing at the foot of the bed, just again screaming. And I looked at her and she looked at me and she just took a breath and she said, "This will kill me." And that was something that stayed with me for a long time.
That is a lot to lay on an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
In that room, in that moment.
Yeah. And it was really hard for me I still think about that. But for days after that, I just kept rehearing that in my mind.
Yeah.
And it kind of started building a fear in me.
Right.
And it started, I think, probably before that, but it started building what I would say is a survival. Like, you've got to survive this.
Okay.
You know? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Was your family connected to church at all growing up?
We were. We went to church. I would say a lot of it was mom and dad are believers. Well, mom was a believer. My mom, passed in April of this year. And they thought it was very important that we went to church.
Right.
And I'm so glad they did.
Yeah.
Because it was a bright light in my life. I had beautiful people that poured into me and loved me.
That's great.
And that was probably my first after school, to have that in my life.
I'm so glad.
And having believers love me.
Yeah.
Even though they might not have understood everything that was going on in my home.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm aware that you go to a pretty cool church right now.
Yeah.
It's a modern, non-denominational church. What was this South Alabama little small town church like?
It was very small town church.
Okay.
Very traditional.
Cool.
The whole organ on one side and the piano on the other, and then like the Sunday school attendance and the tithe on
posting
the wall.
The numbers. Yeah. Right.
But the teaching, I think for the most part it grew me.
Yeah.
I do think it built a little bit of performance in me a little bit, and not so much a relationship with him. Okay. Which I think we'll probably get to that later.
Okay.
He's really been doing a lot in my life with that.
Okay.
But the people there, I know they loved him, and they did rally around us during some really hard times. So
I grew up in a conservative, traditional church like that as well. Couple of different ones, white columns out in the front and wooden pews and all of those things. Yeah. And the same way you might look back at like a piece of wardrobe from the 60s and sort of go, that didn't quite fit right now. Yeah. You might look at some of the trappings of it, but man, they were good for us.
Absolutely.
And they were such places of good people who poured into us, and places where we heard the Bible and heard the stories for the first time and sang the songs that still move our hearts today. And, I'm really thankful for those little country churches and that part of our story along the way. Absolutely. Even if the trappings and wardrobe of church have changed a little bit, there's something beautiful about those.
I do think it did help build a foundation for me.
That's a great way to say it. That's a really good way to say it. Yeah. So every family has stuff, like you said. Nobody's family is perfect.
No.
I think I did a teaching in when I was doing college ministry one time. It was called Everybody's Family is Weird, just to try to help to help everyone sort of relax a little bit about some of the drama or whatever going on at home. But you also said there were some happy times. Can you recall maybe one or two that stand out for some favorite moments?
You know, my brothers were, as much as they were troublemakers and causing all kinds of havoc in my home, they were so funny. And there were just funny things that they would do and say. And I do remember we were in Gatlinburg for a trip. We didn't go on very many vacations, but they did take us to Gatlinburg, and we went to Disney one time. My grandmother and grandfather of my mom's side lived just 5 miles down the road.
Okay.
And my grandmother, Edna, and Mama, better known as.
Right.
She is, she passed on in 2020 to be with the Lord. But she was a really bright light in my life as well.
That's great.
She was like my best friend, and
what a gift.
Always. Oh, she was such a gift. And I don't know how many times I sat by her bed toward the end of her life and just looked at her and said, I don't know who I'd be without you. Like you were Jesus before I knew him. And so some of the most beautiful times is I remember her coming over and spending the weekend with us when Mom and Dad wanted to get away. We'd have the best time. She'd cook and we'd play, and she was just always playing with us or watching us play, which is like so beautiful. And so, and then just them coming over on Sundays to eat and things like that. Like those times were really sweet and special.
You know, I could totally see you aspiring to be another Edna for your family if the Lord brings little ones into your little ones. Just the opportunity to be that positive, believing, cheerleading, bright light as you described it. That's such a cool thing that the Lord put in your life. Yes. She was Jesus to you before you met Jesus.
Yeah.
That we could do an entire podcast on that right there. Hello, goodbye. We're done. Thank you very much. That's good. And talk about a mission in life. If you took that on, if each of us took that on, to be Jesus to somebody before they meet Jesus.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to need a second here, Christie. Yeah. I'm thinking that's a sermon or a book or something, but that's super powerful. And one of the ways that you can track that the Lord has been pursuing you and walking with you from the beginning, and your story's not over.
Right.
What was high school Christie like? What was high school like for you?
High school Christie tried so hard to make right choices. I wanted to make sure that I was just doing all the right things, and I didn't. And I got pretty good at pretending like I was doing them, even though I wasn't.
Where do you think that came from, the want to do all the right things? Was it fear? Was it?
Probably a little bit of fear. Perfectionism was starting to form in me for sure. I think you know me well enough. You've probably seen that a little bit in me. I think that's what that was. And I watched both of my brothers just get in so much trouble that I just didn't want that to be me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My maiden name is Borderline.
Okay.
And I felt like the first couple of years of middle school and high school, it was like the teacher would see Borderline and be like looking over at me.
Another one.
I promise. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good.
But then you weren't.
I was so good. I was a good student. I was such a good student. I very much prided myself in that.
Yeah.
But as far as like my relationships, my friendships, my dating, it wasn't always good choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't always surround myself with people who were seeking the Father.
Yeah. So, a lot of us can relate to that. And some of the ways we could wish we could have some do-overs in some of those things in life. And the for my own story, there was, perfectionism with a little side dish of people pleasing.
Oh, yeah.
That came in for there, which created a lot of fear or shame or hiding or all those kind of things we do to manage our image in front of other people. I'm sure folks listening to the podcast, a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
But in high school, what was youth group like or church world like for high school?
That was wonderful. My youth pastor at that time was Wayne and his wife Hope.
Okay.
And they are still such great friends to me and my family. And
Nice.
they were wonderful. And again, I have told them as well, I don't know where I would be without you being a part of my life. Like, I remember if I had problems, I could either go to Mama or I could go to Wayne's house. I'd ride over to his trailer. And I mean, there were nights I'd stay there till 12, 1 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And I know they wanted to go to bed. They had little children. What was I thinking? But they would just listen and offer such beautiful, godly advice to me. I remember there was a story about Wayne. I was a senior in high school, and I overheard this girl talking about me in class. And I turned around and I said something so ugly to her. And she was in my youth group. And so I got out of school and I just sat in my car and I was like, I got to go talk to Wayne. And so I just drove straight to the church, and he was at his office, and I just said, I have to tell you something. And I just confessed it to him.
Right.
And he just had so much grace for me and so much, just such godly wisdom again for just how to move forward from that. And so,
Another gift in your life
Yes.
of some influence there with Wayne and his wife,
Yes.
Wayne and Hope.
Wayne and Hope, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The stereotype in movies is people finish high school and they get their yearbook and, they write little notes in the back or whatever. And sometimes there's the most likely to achieve or those kind of things. What would your classmates have described Christie as?
I think they would have said, you surprised us.
Huh.
Because I ended up being one of the top students in our class.
Awesome.
And I don't think anybody expected that because I didn't think I could do it either. And so me sitting in that top 10 on that row,
That's cool.
I was so incredibly proud of myself. And I do remember people kind of like, she's up there. And then I remember winning several academic awards as a senior. And I was really proud of how hard I had worked.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I think they would just be like, you surprised us, Christie.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite subject in high school?
Math.
Okay.
Isn't that
All
crazy?
right.
And biology.
Did you recover from that sickness?
I did, actually. When I got to trigonometry, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is my favorite anymore.
That trigonometry is sort of, it's a product of the fall of mankind, and that's where simple math kind of goes off the track.
Yeah.
Were you involved in extracurriculars in high school?
I was in the band.
Okay.
I played the flute, and
Nice.
that was fun for me. I made some friendships in that, and it was something for me to do, like on Friday nights and not be getting into trouble.
Okay.
So there you go.
So how many years ago or days ago have you had a flute in your hand?
Ooh. I think I very jokingly played it for the kids a few years ago.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
Yeah. There are good experiences in the band. It was formative for me in my own high school journey, and you learn a lot about teamwork and leadership and working with other people and accomplishing big tasks and the discipline of having to show up places and all those kind of things. It was a good experience for that. So you finished high school. What's next for Christie?
Well, my brother passed my first year of college, so I decided to go to community college.
Okay.
And he died during the spring semester of my first year. And so there wasn't a lot of emphasis put on education in my family. I can't really think of anything other than my grandfather on my mother's side that anybody finished college.
Wow.
And so I had calls from four-year universities wanting me to come.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get any help to do that. And so I ended up just finishing at the community college and I took some extra classes just because I loved school so much.
Yeah.
Like, you know, kind of nerdy. And then I ended up working at the bank.
Okay.
There in my town. And that was okay.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite. So it wasn't my favorite. But during that process, I had also met Jason. We met pretty early on. I think I was 19 and he was 21.
Okay.
And we met and started dating.
And he grew up in the same town?
I grew up in Jackson, Alabama.
Okay.
And he grew up in Leroy.
Okay.
Okay.
The way you said that,
Leroy, Alabama.
there's stories here,
Yes.
evidently.
Yes, it's like
smaller than Jackson.
Yes, very small.
Okay.
Doesn't even have a red light.
Okay. All right.
And I was just like, Jason, it's not really even a town. It's just like a community. Okay. Y'all got a Dollar General now, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So like literally no red light.
So the best thing to come out of Leroy is Jason Taylor.
Jason Taylor, for real. But anyway, we met, and yeah, he did go to like our rival high school and all of that.
Yeah.
And I will just say briefly, his dad and my dad worked together.
Okay.
At the same place for many, many years.
What did they do?
They worked at Olin Chemical Plant.
Okay.
Where they create like chlorine and things like that
Okay.
for pools
Wow.
and stuff. And do not like each other.
Okay.
So this was immediate, like, from both sides. Like, what do you think you're doing?
Whoa.
So, I know. Isn't that so funny? We called ourselves the Redneck Romeo and Juliet.
I was literally thinking, this is kind of Shakespearean for South Alabama.
I think so, too. Maybe it was
That
like
needs to be a book,
the
too.
McCoys and who is it? No, it wasn't that bad.
The Hatfield and
the
McCoys.
Hatfield, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would always joke like, yeah, we're the Redneck Romeo and Juliet.
Can you imagine a retelling of Romeo and Juliet in the redneck dialect
Yes, I
of
think it would
South
be
Alabama?
great.
Not to stereotype Southern
No,
Alabamans,
right. I
but
think it'd be great. I think it'd be great.
that's cool.
So, yeah.
So you're working at the bank at this
Yeah.
point, and so freshman, your first year of college, your brother passes.
Yeah.
And then how long was that program? Was it a couple of years you were in that program?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're at the bank.
Yes.
And then you and Jason are together. How long did you guys date?
We
We'll
dated-
just dive into
Yeah,
Jason here
yeah,
for a minute.
yeah.
How long did y'all date?
You know, it was pretty quick. We dated about 2 years.
Cool.
Yeah. And about a year and a half in, he asked me to marry him. And so we got engaged and then started
incredible.
planning a wedding. And part of that was we were at the same community college. So
Great.
we kind of met there.
Yeah.
You know, we saw each other in class and we were like, hey, I think I know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then he moved here to go to
Okay.
MTSU.
To Murfreesboro.
And we kind of did this long distance thing for a while. And we did not like it, of course. Nobody
Sure.
would. And so after he had been at MTSU in Murfreesboro here for a year, he got the ring and he came back. So bless his heart, he got to be here in Murfreesboro. I stayed in South Alabama planning a wedding. Isn't that lucky of him?
Well,
Because we didn't have cell phones.
oh,
So
that's
like
right.
it was like
Yeah.
long distance phone calls 2 nights a week, and that was it. There's no telling what I talked about in those 30 minutes on Tuesday nights.
Yeah. Well, you're having to keep track of the cost of it all.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Daddy would like highlight what I owed him on the phone bill.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I remember those days.
Yeah. I
Get the
bet
phone
you
bill out and
Yes, yes.
everybody own up.
did. Yes. Yep.
So you guys date for a couple of years. You get married.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you guys live when you get married? Do you?
Well, he took a semester off of school. So
Okay.
he took the spring semester off and moved back home and worked. And we got married in March. And we just stayed in a little apartment for a
Gotcha.
few months
Gotcha.
and then came here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So very quickly.
Very quick, yeah. Because he had to get back started at that MTSU. So,
Yeah. What are a couple of things that you love about Jason Taylor?
oh my goodness. He is probably the most kind person that I have ever met.
Yeah.
He is so incredibly loving. And he just knows so much. I don't think he would ever be like, I'm so smart. But he is so incredibly smart.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't know something, he will figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
anything breaks in our house. I think we've had to call a repairman like 3 times our whole marriage. That's amazing.
He might be offended if you called a repairman.
Oh, I've never called a repairman. That'd have to be his call. But like, he's just been an amazing friend and husband to
great.
me. It's not always been easy, of course. It's like no marriage is.
Right.
And we were young and we moved here.
Yeah.
But when I first met him, one of the things that I really loved about him before I knew how smart he really was, he was so funny. He made me laugh.
Right.
So, and my mom even noticed that. She's like, you laugh so much when you're with him.
He has such a quick wit.
He has very quick wit.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, how do you come up with all that? What in the world? So,
Well, when I first met Jason, we hit it off quickly with sarcasm and quick jokes and all those kind of things. Yeah. And I just love that about him. And I would affirm what you said about his kindness. Mm-hmm. He is just willing. He's just, what do you need? And just a beautiful, beautiful human. Mm-hmm. And God has given you another gift. We're finding a little theme in here along the way.
For sure.
So 26 years, right, for y'all being married? How long have you been married?
Is that right? Yes, almost 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
We got married in 98. So is that right?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there.
But no, is that the right math?
It's not trig, so I don't know. It's funny.
Okay. So, over 25.
That's great.
So,
That's great.
Yeah.
We can do the math later.
Yeah,
by the way.
I don't worry about that.
What would you say is one of the keys to sustaining a great marriage over a quarter century?
I think what Jason and I have learned the most is forgiveness and seeing the other person as a child of God.
It's great.
And someone who has hurts in their past. And they look at the world a little differently than I do. We both look at things a little differently, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, it was like I had to really learn, it doesn't always have to be my way. So.
That's a beautiful encouragement to maybe young couples or those looking toward marriage. Buckle up. It's not easy because you become instant roommates and housemates with another sinful, flawed person who's got their own baggage that they couldn't even help but bring into the marriage.
Right.
And God put us in these marriages to be a blessing to the other person. And we are part of God's plan for ministering to that other person. Yeah. And that's humbling.
It is. It is, and it's beautiful.
That's right.
It really is. It doesn't feel good sometimes.
Yeah.
Or not most times it doesn't. But the humbling that happens when you're learning how to be gracious and for it not to always have to be your way and to really listen to the other person, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful what God can do.
When I perform weddings for couples, one of my favorite parts is to stand up in front of them and say, look at each other, and I want you to see something. God has not left you alone.
Yeah.
He has brought someone alongside of you to be that care and ministry and love and forgiveness and grace and truth and, all those things. And a gift, another gift in your life. And then, so you guys moved to Murfreesboro.
We did. Oh, I was
the big city.
Yeah. Oh, it did feel like such a big city to me. I remember driving down Broad Street and I accidentally cut this guy off and he flipped me the bird and was screaming ugly names at me. And I just cried the whole way home. And I was like, I don't like it here. It was very, I couldn't even drive in Nashville. It took me a really long time. Sometimes Jason would take me driving just to practice because I was so afraid.
Yeah. So what is the bird? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, the bird.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, Kyle. I'm like, what do you want me to do it? I'm not. What? It's out of that Southern Alabama thing?
That's hilarious. Sorry. Okay, focus. I'll get back on track here for a minute. So you guys are here and newly married and figuring out life here and those kind of things. Are you working at a bank here? Or are you at home?
Yes, I did. I got hired pretty quickly at a bank here. I started working for Bank of America, and I just bounced all over the place, met a lot of different people.
Yeah.
I liked it at first, but then I didn't. It was just kind of like I ended up working at a bank in Smyrna. And it was so busy, and I had people threaten me and things like that. It was that was scary.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this every day.
Right.
It ain't worth it,
Right.
And so the Lord opened up an opportunity for me to work at the church that we were attending as the financial secretary for a couple of years before I had our son. So that was kind of a nice, now, working at a church wasn't, always roses either, but it was better than the bank.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. Two amazing kids.
Yes, two amazing kids.
Jacob and Laura Rose. Let's talk about them for a little bit.
Yeah.
So what are your kids doing now? How old are your kids now?
Okay. Jacob.
A little more math for you to.
Oh, no. Jacob, I can do this. Jacob is 22. He's about to graduate from MTSU.
That's great.
In December. And we are all very excited for him. He's ready to be done. He was the graduate of 2020, and that was just kind of stunk.
It's really hard.
Everything just, as we all know, it shut down, and he didn't get to do his cap and gown and none of that,
Yeah.
And so he didn't really want to do it for this graduation, but he's doing it for his own. Because I said, I really want to see you in a cap and gown, and you've worked really hard.
It's great.
And not just like, this is not going to just be from college. This is just going to be like all the things.
Yeah.
So for me, because I homeschooled.
Okay.
I homeschooled Jacob and Laura from preschool till graduation. And so I'm like, this is kind of, you did it, Mom.
Yeah.
You saw them through.
This is your cap and gown too, a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just going to share that with you a little bit. So, yeah.
Good for you.
And then, so Laura Rose graduated in May of this year.
From high school.
Yes, thank you. And she is attending Motlow right now. She's doing pretty good. She did some of that last year.
Yeah.
She's 19. And she just got engaged. So she's getting married in May. So I was like, oh, okay. So we graduated in May. And now the next May, we're getting married. Okay. It's a lot for Mama's heart. But she's real excited, and we're excited for her.
Good.
Yeah.
One of the things that's encouraging is she is a product of an amazing home.
Yeah.
With Jason and Christie Taylor.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
So with the Lord and that background, she's going to be great.
She is. They both are really great kids. I do see them seeking after the Father.
Yeah.
And they're just on their own journey with that, and I'm just cheering them on.
Yeah.
It's hard when that life change starts happening, though. Oh my goodness, as you know, it's just really hard. Because I was telling someone the other day, I said, I feel like I was the coach for so long, and I'm on the field, and I'm telling them all the plays and what to do, and I was like, and now I'm in the stands somewhere up there, and I'm just watching and cheering.
Yeah.
And if they need something, they know I'm up there.
Right.
But I'm not down on the field anymore. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, yeah. Fully. Fully.
Yeah.
But as we turn different pages in the book, of chapters and with our own lives and our kids, the Lord's got something different that He's going to put you on the field for along the way. And that's exciting to think about.
Yeah.
When our last child flew the nest and headed off to college, Stacy and I were like, okay, there's new opportunity. I mean, there's loss that we're grieving, that every day in and out of every detail of their lives, but there's some cool opportunity for us as a couple, and there's new opportunity for us in a new adventure. Yeah. We didn't know we'd be planning a church, but the Lord did. So it's cool to think about how the Lord's going to continue to open up opportunities to use you and Jason in these days.
He will. He will.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your story, your life, just personally. How does Christie recharge her batteries?
how does Christie recharge her batteries? I have really discovered, I was sharing earlier, I was a very shy child.
Okay.
But as I grew, I was like, oh no, I think I do like people. And so I do have this kind of introvert, extrovert kind of thing going on. I don't know what you call that. Is there a name for someone who's kind of both?
I think I'm probably one of them too. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
If you find out, let me know.
Okay. I love to just be at home with, when my kids were there. And Laura's there still sometimes. She does still live with us for right now. But just being at home.
Yeah.
I love to cook.
Okay.
And so that's kind of a release for me. I like to walk. So recharging for me is just finding some quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not necessarily like silence and
Sure.
but that does help.
Right. Yeah.
And some breathing, and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of how I guess what I really practice is like just feeling with him and just kind of considering that I need to be in his presence.
Yeah.
And carry that with me when I go. Does that make sense?
To be still.
Yeah.
Is the biblical phrase, and it's not corny. It's accurate.
It really is. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to slow down to hear what he's saying.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, as Psalm 23, relays, he's trying to lead us to some green pastures and to some still waters and those kind of things. But the reason I asked about how you recharge your batteries instead of what do you like to do in your spare time, because I think hobbies are fine and good, but all of us as people, we have, our batteries get low and we have to find ways to recharge that. And what would you say to moms who might be listening now and their house is busy, their house is potentially a little loud, the schedule is full and all those things, what would you say to them about how to maybe carve out that time or fight for that time?
It's hard to find that time. I remember those days, especially as a homeschool mom, finding the quiet and not feeling like I've got to do the next thing. And so what I wish I would have known then was how to be still, even just within my soul, even with the busy and even with the moving around. How could I just breathe him in deep and just release all the things that haven't been done?
Right.
And looking around at all the things that haven't been done and just love whoever is there with me. I feel like I missed time with my kids and I felt like I rushed them too much. As I was still, as a young mom, struggling with that perfectionism. And if my house looked a certain way, I was not happy. And then I made everybody miserable.
Right.
So until I could get happy when everything was in its place or whatever. And so now I'm like, nobody's making a mess anymore. And so messes are okay. And I wish that I would have known to just invite Jesus into the mess. Just wherever there's Cheerios or goldfish on the floor or there's paint all over your grandmother's table, that happens. That you just say, okay, how can I love these people right now?
Yeah.
The best that I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a thing that happens with maturity when we give ourselves permission to get still.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in this perfectionism wheel that we get on, we think, oh, it's wasting time, or I'm not being productive, or I'm being lazy, or whatever. And we don't necessarily equate the Sabbath qualities of that, these little micro Sabbaths, when you can say, I'm going to take this time because I'm going to be better for my marriage. I'm going to be better for my kids later because I take this time strategically and all those things. Talking about inviting Jesus into the mess is a powerful reality. want our houses to look a certain way for other people when they come over, but we don't need to clean up our hearts a little bit for Jesus, to spend time with him. And often there's something really special about the raw quality of our heart and the exhaustion and the complication and the way we're in tension and confliction and we don't have it figured out and we're exhausted and a little ticked off all at the same time, all those things.
But, a little ticked off. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause I feel like sometimes we're trying so hard to do all the things in our own energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just reminds me so much of, John 15, where he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches.
It's good.
Apart from me, you can do nothing, especially like take care of these little children and and love them and be okay with the mess.
Yeah.
Be okay with that mess. Be okay with those undone things.
And tracking with John 15, where you just started, the key to being fruitful is the abiding.
Yes.
And that abiding has within it this idea of stillness and rest and being with him, where when we spend time with the Lord, he's not looking at the unfinished projects and the things that are stacked and undone. Right. He's just looking at us.
Absolutely. And that's where I want to be. Like, I just want to be looking at him.
Yeah.
And then all else that I need to do will follow that.
Yeah.
Because he will guide me. He will give me the strength. And I will be doing it with his strength and not trying to do all this self stuff.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
That's good. So I have a thought.
Yeah.
I have a thought, maybe a term for an introvert who's actually an extrovert sometime. Okay. I think it's a podcaster. And so I think maybe you need to start a podcast. I think you've got deep waters that run, that would be encouragement for people. And maybe that's where you could be alone and then, then be with a lot of people when you put your podcast out.
You were funny, Tom.
And inviting Jesus into the mess is episode number 1 for you. So
what was that other one earlier? Being Jesus before I knew him. I have some, that's episode 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We may have to share that one because I'm pretty excited about that one. But, but no, I was just thinking, who knows how the Lord might use Christie Taylor in this season of her life, because all these different people that the Lord's brought, all these gifts that he's brought to you, all these experiences, which they're not baggage. There's something else. And I don't know what the right term for that is. Maybe that's the 3rd episode for the podcast is to say, let's relabel those things.
Yes.
Those were steps and building blocks, and those were the muscle forming kind of things.
They were.
That make us sort of who we are today.
Absolutely. And it, to me, he used it and is still using it to draw me so close to him.
Yeah.
There was a time that I would have said, it's fine. It's no big deal. Everybody has issues, and baggage. But it wasn't fine. It was weighing on me. And I finally had to admit to the Father a while back that I felt like he had failed me, that I felt like the loss and the things. You know how when you're feeling like you're being humbled, okay, sometimes you can kind of bring that humility onto yourself. And sometimes there are just things that happen to you that are just hard. They feel undeserved.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for this.
Right.
Did I really deserve this? Those are hard things. And I did have to just confess to him, I feel like you failed me.
Wow.
And it was such a beautiful invitation, because it was conviction. In that moment when I was able to just say that out loud, I felt this kindness of conviction, that call, the kindness of repentance, right?
Yeah.
And
to name what might have been lurking,
name it,
between you and the Lord.
I'm going to tell you what happened. I was singing in church, and I've never been so grateful for low lighting, because I was like weeping. But we were singing the elevation worship song, "Do It Again."
Okay.
And it's walking around these walls. I thought
by now they'd fall. Yeah.
You've never failed me. And I literally could not sing that third line. And I just said, "Oh, but I feel like you have." Like I just said it. And the tears came. And I heard him say to me, "Bring that to me." Because that is what's blocking our connection. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
That's what's blocking the abiding.
Wow.
But I didn't know that at the time. But that's kind of, I look back at that moment and I think that's where I feel like he really started inviting me to look deeper into what abiding means. So how did we get to that? I don't remember.
I don't know, but that's the good stuff.
Yeah, that is the good stuff. So,
that is the good stuff.
Yeah.
Because what you just said was incredibly generous to give away what took you a long time to learn.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because there's somebody listening right now and maybe their lyric is something different, but there's something standing between them and the abiding.
Yeah.
And it took you a while.
It did.
For you to decipher, that's a better word, to decipher what the Lord was wanting to point to.
Yep.
And that's very kind of you to offer that. And if you're listening today and you find it difficult to get still, to abide, and abiding seems more like theory than reality, maybe begin with a humble prayer that says, "Lord, if there's something that has been unspoken or unnamed that I'm holding to down deep in my heart, that's between me and the abiding, let's get to it."
Yeah. That search me and know me.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right on. That's right on. Well, Christie, let's kind of turn a corner here in some of our conversation about some of the twists and turns in your story that you've been walking with, particularly in this year and maybe even for the last full year, with your mom's declining health. And she had a diagnosis, I guess, a year ago. Is that about this time?
It actually was a couple of years ago, and they just kind of kept watching. But unfortunately, the cancer turned into something different. And so in October of 2023, they went in to try to remove the bladder. It was bladder cancer. And they realized it was inoperable. Okay. It had kind of grown and attached to her pelvic bone, and it was just rough. And they did a few little things when they were in there, but that was really hard. I remember she had her surgery in Mobile, Alabama. So I got up at like 2 a.m. and just drove straight to the hospital, got there while she was in the OR. And once the surgery was over and we got to see her, taken to her room, I went back to the hotel and I just wept. And I've looked back at that and I've asked the Lord, was I afraid? Yeah. Was I being pessimistic? No. But I knew this would take her.
Okay.
And so I think the fear obviously was, I don't want her to have to walk this, and I don't want to walk this. Like my grandmother had passed in 2020, and Edna was my best friend.
Right.
And so like I still felt like I was really grieving her. And for this to be where my mom was going, I couldn't even fathom. And I also felt like with my mom and my dad, there was so much unresolved that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to work out. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So you began this journey, and I love the honesty that all of us need to practice, which is, Lord, I don't want to walk this road. I see where this road is headed. Yeah. And I'm not doubting you, but I see where this road is headed.
Right.
And I don't want to walk it.
Yeah.
So talk about that season for a little while and what that was like to get started on that post-surgery.
Yes, she had her surgery, and Unfortunately, about a month later, she got pneumonia, was hospitalized again. By that time, we had moved her to Birmingham, to University of Alabama, Birmingham Hospital. There's just better care there, and my sister lives there. And then it's a shorter drive for me to be able to go back and forth. So once Mom kind of got over the pneumonia, then they wanted her to start chemo and immunotherapy. And she got about 2 rounds of that, and she got MRSA.
Oh, man.
And so from October to January, she just became a different person.
Wow.
I mean, the physical pain was almost like it broke what little bit of mask and facade that she had. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah.
Does that?
Yeah.
I mean, I know as a pastor, you see a lot of people hurt, and that pain, the physical pain for her was nothing, I don't think, compared to what we saw her going through.
Wow.
With the emotional and the confusion. And it was like when she got the MRSA, let me back up. She was in Birmingham for her first couple of rounds of chemo, and she really wanted to go back home, which is in Jackson, Alabama. Yeah. So we took them home, and that's when the MRSA showed up. So Dad ended up putting her in the little hospital there in Jackson, and it was just not as good a treatment. It's not, they're not as quick, to get treatment. And so she's literally suffering with this MRSA. And after about a week, they didn't really know it was MRSA. And literally, as we finally got the ambulance to the hospital to transfer her to Birmingham, the nurse pulled me aside and said, "It's in her blood. Wow. She's going sepsis."
Wow.
I didn't tell my dad until we were in, because we all had to drive. So I followed the ambulance. I didn't let her out of my sight. Like, I just followed that ambulance all the way to Birmingham and was in her room waiting for her. And I don't know if you've ever been around someone who is sepsis. It is horrific. I would say that her sepsis days were worse than her hospice days.
Wow.
They were horrible. She went through this cycle for hours of thinking she was falling, cried out for help, and then called for her mom over and over and over again. She was in such anguish. And I didn't leave her side for about 2 days. Yeah. I was really afraid. Like, I think she is not going to make this. And she made it through that with some really powerful antibiotics. But it really was, I look back at those days of the sepsis that she was going through, and it was so lonely for us as her family, because I don't know anybody in Birmingham.
Oh, man.
Like, nobody was coming to the hospital to pray with us or just visit with us to pass the time.
Right.
And it was really, I really began to feel the Father just say, "I'm here. Just be with me. And I am here with you."
Wow.
And that's where the abiding became more and more real to me. And what does that really look like in the everyday, but also in this really hard?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, where should I go from here? Because it's so much, and I don't want to go every little detail.
So is that in January?
That was in January.
Of 24.
Yes.
Of this year.
Yes. And she stayed in the hospital dealing with the sepsis for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I decided, after talking to this huge team of doctors, I had decided to call in palliative care.
Right.
But my dad and my sister, particularly my dad, just wasn't ready for that yet. And so nobody was mad at me for doing that or anything.
Sure.
But because I just didn't feel like she couldn't really communicate with us very well. The sepsis really messed with her mental capacity. She was very confused. It was like she just got dementia overnight.
Wow.
And she was never like really who we remember her as. There were little glimpses here and there.
And you didn't want her to be in pain. So the palliative care was
in pain. Yeah, that was really like my fear was that she was just going to lay there in pain.
Right.
And I will say this, the MRSA, I did not know this, but the MRSA like attached to her artificial knee. And so it was like super swollen, and it was just like having a field day in that knee. And I felt at that time like she's not going to be able to walk. They had to take her replacement out. I have never heard of that before. So we were learning as we go.
Sure.
You know, and I know it was hard for my dad, you know, to even think about that she was leaving us, you know. So that was in January.
Right. And during that stay, you don't even have time to process it all.
No.
But you have been thrown into the position of being caregiver, decision maker, and caretaker of your dad, both literally and also like guiding him through what needs to be decided.
Yeah.
What was that experience like wearing those hats?
It was lonely. But again, the Lord, I look back and I'm like, he gave me so much strength. I just don't even know how I slept in that hospital and how I felt. How was I even functioning other than coffee? You know, so Dad was hurting greatly. And I will say to Mom, being in the state that she was in was so hard for him to watch her lash out for like, we don't even know why.
Not being herself.
Sometimes saying things that were like, she probably really did mean that. But if she wasn't in this state, she would never have said that.
Right.
And so like, we're having to carry that too, you know. And my sister, I'll back up just a tad bit. Right before my mom had her surgery in October of 2023, my sister collapsed with liver failure in August of 2023. And so she was not fully able to really, she was doing the best she could, but like she was, and I had gone and taken care of her in August prior to all of this happening. And so I felt like I was carrying a lot of weight. It's hard for me to answer that really.
You know what's cool though? I'm not trying to put words to this for you, but you just said it a second ago. God gave you strength. Like you weren't, you know, praying to make it through the next 10 minutes. You just did it. You just woke up and did what the day needed to have happen. And the Lord was good and met you in that.
He was. And I will say too, the nurses and doctors there, most of them were just such beautiful people. Like I felt like I kind of had some friends, you know, even though I didn't have any familiar faces.
Right.
That was kind of nice. And I remember there was one night I was laying in Mom's room and she was trying to settle, and I was like, "Shh, Mom," because you know sometimes she kind of get cranked up. I'm like, "Mom, shh, be quiet." And so, and I heard the nurses talking out in the hallway about my family, and they were saying such nice things about us, and it was really sweet. It was like that felt like a gift.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Just another little drop from the Lord to just.
I felt like that was a little encouragement from him to just be like, your love is being seen, and just keep pouring it out.
Yeah.
Just keep letting you be my little vessel, and you just let me keep pouring my love out, and I will see you through this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So maybe moving into February or March. What's the situation like at that point?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot left for them to do once the sepsis kind of cleared up, but she couldn't walk. And so they ended up putting her in a rehab place.
Right.
And she stayed there for about a month. And, when I talked earlier about knowing that this was probably going to take her, there was another moment like that. I had been with her at the rehab, and I told her bye, and I came back home to Murfreesboro for a few days, and, because I did take care of my family.
Right.
So I was trying to do that too. I was trying to do all the things. And I went back about a few days later, really. And I went to see her at the rehab, and I immediately uncovered, her leg to kind of look at her knee, see if it was swollen. And her right foot had dropped, and it kind of looked droopy, and it was almost frozen. Like she couldn't, how they'll get you in physical therapy to push the gas pedal. She couldn't do that any longer. And I just sat on the bed, and I just said, Father, I know she will not stand. Help me get through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I knew there's no way that she was going to be able.
Right. Right.
And not that he couldn't do it.
Sure.
But her body was breaking.
Right.
Her body was worn out. And even before she got cancer, she has dealt with her health. Losing 2 children, or losing the baby and then losing 2 grown sons.
Man.
She carried that with her. She even said to me in one of the hospital stays, she started crying, and she said, what does it say about me that I have so many dead children in heaven? Oh. And I didn't even know what to say. I just said, but I'm here and I love you and they're waiting for you. I mean, but for her to carry that of like, that was her identity. Her pain became her identity.
She was believing some things about herself that weren't true even.
Yeah.
But you can understand how those tragedies piled up.
Yes.
And broke open some parts of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that when your mom was diagnosed in 23, that there was so much you wanted to be able to say or to talk about. Did you guys ever have some opportunity to have some real conversations?
We did a few times. Again, she never really recovered from all the confusion.
Okay.
And, but there were some moments. She asked me once, she said, will you pray for me? And that was really beautiful. And I said, of course I will, and we sang over her and we prayed for her. And, but she and I did talk some, and I was able to tell her, I always wanted you to be my friend, not just my mom, but my friend. And I hope that she understood that I had desired that. And I think we had that in some aspects, but in some ways there was still things in between. There were just things in between us that kind of blocked that some.
Some of that is so sinister when you think about it,
because
we hold on to these empty spots, but we can't go back in time.
No.
And so apart from the Lord touching those parts of us and giving us what we need to let it go, because it's just a load of bull to just say to someone, oh, just let it go. Only the strength of Almighty God is going to help us let go of some of these things we've been carrying for decades.
Absolutely.
Because we cannot go back in time.
No.
And it's sinister the way the enemy brings them up and causes us to remember them and replay them and then hold them and absorb them and identify with them and all of those things. And maybe somebody's listening today and you can relate to that, that the one that you wish you could make things better with has already gone on home to be with the Lord.
Yeah.
And you can't go back in time.
No.
And so ask him to touch the parts that are down deep that need to be let go, but only he can help you do it.
Yep. I really have had to sit with that and just say, Father, only you know what to do with this pain. All I do is know how to hold it. And then sometimes I'm even listening to it, letting it speak to me, letting it hurt me even further.
Right.
Lie to me.
Right.
And you're the only one that can turn this into something beautiful.
Yeah. And all of us have those things.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, like the little phrases, the little things, the little moments from years ago have such bright, vivid
I know.
power over
They
us
do,
right now.
like a look.
Yeah.
I remember came out of the bathroom at the hospital and she just looked at me like, I don't know. And it hurt my feelings. And I was like, oh, I can't hold on to that.
Yeah.
No. And so I really started, almost like felt like a fight in me of like, I'm not going to allow this to continue to speak to me and tell me I'm not worthy or there wasn't enough love between us or whatever.
It's good.
No.
That's good.
You don't have to do that, but it is a process. It isn't easy. It isn't easy.
So picking up back with your mom's story and her decline, I remember a conversation with you at church one day in March, and you were just relaying a little bit about the back and forth life you were living, the driving back and forth, but how in some ways the Lord was speaking to you on those drives. He would,
I don't know. I would put on, some praise music, sometimes not. And I would tend to kind of replay what happened at the hospital or, and again, what we were talking about earlier, like just that inviting him into that mess because it felt so messy in my heart and in my head and it felt confusing and, just what was happening, what has happened, things that I feel hurt about.
Right.
And I really would just weep and it would just be a time for him and I to just spend together.
Yeah.
I would sometimes just like talk to my passenger side seat like he was just sitting there.
Yeah.
And it was just...
It's great.
It's just precious moments for me of him reminding me, I love you. You are mine. You don't need to look for acceptance anywhere else but me. I love your mom, and I'm doing something with her. And I also want to say, too, as I walked this road watching her in that anguish, I kept thinking, okay, well, when he does take her, she will be whole and she will really know him. But I was like, Father, I want to really know you now. I heard Francis Chan say in one of his teachings recently, I don't want my entrance into glory to be so different than what my life was here. And I was like, yes.
That's good.
That is so good. And I'm like, I can live in your full presence here. But I think what I shared with you was I had to get to this place of, I want you, Father, more than I want healing, restoration, my reputation restored, whatever is going on, whatever is hurting. I just want you.
Yeah. What's cool in that statement, there's 100 things that are powerful in it, but what's cool in it is that it's the product of humility. Because even in saying that, Lord, I've lived a while wanting these things more than I've wanted you.
Yeah.
You can't help but reverse engineer the phrase.
Sure.
And so, but I am now at a place where I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
And I'm knowing you in a way through this hard season that I wouldn't probably know you otherwise.
Right.
But I'm at a place now where I'm hearing you calling me and inviting me, and I want you more than I want this thing I've been asking for.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought about something the other day as I was praying about being here with you today. I remember when I first, I think it was one of your first few teachings that I sat under. And you mentioned the Westminster Catechism. And you talked about that first question, what is the chief end of man? Like I'm telling you what you already know, I know. No. But when you said the answer, which is what? Glorify God.
And enjoy him forever.
And I remember when you said that, and I've probably read the Westminster Catechism at some point, but like that was really fresh to me when you said that. And I was like, okay, glorify God, check. Enjoy him forever. What is that? And he had already started that work in me, but just in that season, there was like something was missing. And that was just another thing where it was like, what is missing? And it was the abiding was missing. And so that, yeah.
Well, you see the threads connecting all these things together here of the Chan quote you were talking about, like, I want to be so close to him now that heaven's not that different.
Yeah, that's amazing, right?
And
that's
you're
a pretty good goal.
You're longing on your drives just to know him more and to enjoy him more. And you're starting to get to a place where you can put reality to that phrase, enjoying him.
Yes.
And can we just kind of lean into this moment and embrace it? Like, part of enjoying him might look like you talking to the empty passenger seat in your car on the road back from Alabama.
Yes.
You know, that's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Because the end of it is you're with your Father.
Yeah.
And that intimate moment in that car is so real and deep and powerful.
Yeah.
And so maybe we would all do well to let go of this thought that we have to be so formal with our God, or that we have to show up in prayer with a first list of apologies for what we've not done right. And we can just come and to our Abba, sit at his feet, climb into his lap, buckle into the driver's seat, whatever, and be with him. And maybe the great work of our adult lives is to learn how to be with God.
Yes. And it's so beautiful. But I didn't know how to do it. And so there have been times I've said, Father, I don't know how to abide. Teach me.
Yeah.
And he has.
Yeah.
By others sharing with me, just moments like that where I love how you said like the reality. Like it's real.
Yeah.
It is a reality. And so, yeah, it's just enjoying him forever. I'm like, oh, I want that.
I think a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, a lot of years I spent identifying in my Christian life. And notice how I say that, not in my relationship with Jesus.
Yep.
But in my Christian life, I identified as a worker for him. Like that I was supposed to be doing and active in doing these things. And I was supposed to be measuring up to some clipboard list he had where he was inspecting me every day. Yeah. And I missed on the relationship and the enjoying and all of those things and enjoying him forever. And so I love that the road back and forth, which in itself is an incredible descriptor of how hard it was. Yeah. And you're doing family here, marriage here, and family there, and caretaking and loving there. I love how all of that was the setting for God teaching you.
It was a beautiful time. It was a lot of tears, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah,
because it grew me. And it just took me deeper into, like you said, that intimacy with him.
Yeah.
Of just being my friend and my father. And I couldn't have made it without it.
So at some point, the Lord brought your mom home.
He did.
Talk about some of those days and weeks.
Yeah. After she got out of rehab, Jason and I moved my parents into a kind of like an assisted living type thing. Well, it was independent living, but it had a nursing staff.
Right.
And she was only there for about a week and a half or so. And she had kind of come back a little bit as far as like her mental, but as soon as that infection started showing back up, we could tell like something was wrong. And so I came down to see them, and I just told Dad, I said, we're going to have to take her back to the hospital. And this was, I believe, the very last week of March. And, she stayed in the hospital for about a week. I think it was the day after Easter. She just kind of went to sleep. And I don't think she opened her eyes back up. And I think by Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, they suggested that we go ahead and take her on to palliative hospice care.
Yeah.
Her blood pressure was starting to become very erratic, but she did look peaceful. And she never spoke to us again, which was in some ways hard, but it was like, what else is there to say?
Yeah.
So we spent, goodness, I was so afraid she was going to pass on Jacob's birthday. So she went into palliative care on the 3rd, and his birthday was the 4th. And I was like, oh, Mama, stay with us a little bit longer. So Jason and I drove right down on the 3rd. So I could be there when they took her to palliative care. So they kind of waited on me for us to just make that walk. It's really hard. And so we took her onto palliative care, and she just slept. They gave her lots of good meds to keep her body from hurting. And there were a couple of days there that she could squeeze our hands.
Yeah.
But the people in palliative care, I've never experienced that before. Everybody in my life that's left us it's been sudden.
Yeah.
And so I'd never, so as soon as they came in, I'm like, you need to tell me what to expect. Like, I need to know what this might look like. And Dad was kind of thinking about taking her back to the independent living, but they were like, we don't think that would be good. She needs pain management, and we can do that better with her here. So I was grateful that he agreed to that. But I ended up leaving on Friday to go back home because Laura was going to prom, and I didn't want to miss that.
Sure.
I didn't want to miss getting her ready. And so that evening, or that morning, that was Friday morning, I told Jason, I said, just help me leave. Help me leave. Help me be strong. And we prayed, and I just had to tell her bye because I didn't know, I whispered to her, I'll be back Sunday. This was Friday morning. I said, I'll be back Sunday, but if you need to go, and if he comes for you, you go with him.
Wow.
And so that was really hard. I felt like Jason was like kind of having to pull me out of the room. But we went on home, and, I was with Laura, and that was just super sweet, but I was still feeling very like I need to be back there. And so Sunday morning, I think I got up again at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep anyway.
Sure.
And so I just hit the road, and she was still with us. And April was texting me updates, my baby sister. She was texting me updates. Her blood pressure was still becoming really erratic, but it was starting to get lower and lower. And I got there, and we were talking to her and singing over her and praying. And then we all just kind of got quiet. And Dad he went to sleep. He was resting. They had brought him a recliner, and he was sitting beside her resting. And I looked up at her, and I saw just a tiny movement on her chest of just this really shallow breath. And then her chest fell back down. And it was so incredibly like a long pause. She had kind of been doing that. And I got up and I looked over at her and I looked at her hands, and I knew it was time that she was taking her last breaths. And so I woke Dad up, got April, and we just all stood around her and we told her to go. We told her to go with Jesus. And I said, Mama, be happy and be whole. And she took just a couple of more really long pauses and short, shallow breaths, and then she stopped. And we just sang Amazing Grace. And we just talked to the Lord like he was in the room, because we kind of felt like he was, like he was. And so I really felt his presence. And we just had to tell her goodbye. And it was the most beautiful thing and the most heartbreaking thing.
There's something sacred about that sometimes I use the imagery when I'm thinking about new people coming to Jesus. I use the imagery of the prodigal son and the father running to him and him coming home after he had been gone. And I love the idea of the people who are already Christians lining the road with signs saying, welcome home, come on, we're no better than you, we just got here earlier. So when you were saying that, I had this different lining the road picture of you guys standing there going, go on with Jesus, Mama, go on home and rest and be whole and well done, your race is over, all those kind of things. Right. What a sacred thing to sing and pray and be there together.
It was. And we stayed with her for a few hours after that. And finally they were like, y'all gotta go. And we were like, okay. And so then, of course, that began the preparation for the service and everything. Yeah. And Dad was like, I don't know who's going to do the eulogy. And I'm like, we don't have to have a eulogy. It's Mama's funeral. We can do whatever we want. But then I felt the Lord say, you. And I was like, I can't do that. But I did. And I just told the Father, I said, you're going to have to give me the words. And he said, I will. And he did.
Yeah.
And so I was able to speak at her service, and it was so healing for me. It was a moment of me able to just speak real about who she was, what she struggled with, and how much we were going to miss her.
Yeah.
And that she was no longer with us, but now she had become our future because she's with the Lord. So, gone on ahead, and she's not part of our past per se.
It's good.
She will be our future. So
yeah. I love the Godward, heavenward, biblical idea of saying we didn't love her in the past tense. We love her because we're on our way to her.
Yeah. I'm going that way.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a song Laura Rose listens to, and I love that song. I don't know if it's an old hymn, but it's I'm Going That Way. And it's just so good.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
So a new chapter begins at this point.
Yeah.
Where life after this really hard season, and some of that includes taking care of your dad.
Yeah.
And helping him. And how's your dad doing right now?
He's, of course, really lonely. He's struggling with some health things too, which has been hard because he's still, in the small town where they've lived there for so long. It's hard to make that move. We would love for him to come to Nashville area or go to Birmingham, either one. But he's not ready to do that. And so that's definitely been a surrender for me to just say, look, I've said, I feel like I've been diligent to say, this is what we would like. This is what we feel like is good for you and for us. But this is in the Father's hands now. And so, we'll just wait and see what the Lord is going to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not going to nag Daddy. I ain't going to do it. I know he'd probably listen to this and be like, oh, really? You're not? Okay, good. I'm going to hold you to that. So.
Well, way to go not taking on
right.
a sense of responsibility for managing his decisions
Absolutely.
or all of these things, but to be available and ready and offering counsel, wisdom, and help, but not letting it consume you.
And that has been a bit of a struggle at first. And even before Mom died, that had kind of caused some tension because I so wanted them to be closer because her health was starting to get bad. She had taken a really bad fall in May of 2023. And that really kind of was like, y'all have got to do something different because they live these scary steps at their house. And so, that has been hard for me to be able to let it go.
Yeah.
And just let the Lord do what he is going to do.
It's good.
Yeah.
So this experience that you walked through with your mom, thank you very much for sharing that with us and for bringing us in to some of what the Lord's been doing in your heart through all this. What kind of encouragement would you give to somebody listening today who's maybe on a similar road or at a similar part, or they're just beginning this journey of somebody's decline or all those? What would you say to them?
Lean in close to the Father. Do not try to take it all on. You're only one person. Ask for help when you need it. And you might not be able to fix it. Probably not.
Yeah.
If I could have fixed a lot of things, I would have. But I couldn't. So don't try to fix it. And just surrender it. I feel like I came to this place of surrendering a lot of things, all the things. But it was kind of like I still wanted to hope.
Sure.
So like there's this hopeful surrender. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's okay to hope.
That's right.
Even if it looks completely like hopeless. And it really may be that the Lord may give you, like, I feel like the Lord gave me that knowing of this will take her.
Yeah.
And I haven't really ever said that out loud until like this podcast. So but it was this kind of knowing. And so even if he gives you that, he's still doing something.
Sure.
He's still working in this situation in everybody who's involved. You never know. And that was something I had to remember too as I was walking this. Who is seeing me? Who is hearing me? Are they seeing Jesus in me? Are they seeing his love?
Yeah.
And you just take it one day at a time too. That would be something, because I was always trying to figure it out. And that was something I felt like in those talks in the car on the way back and forth.
Yeah.
That he really kept reassuring me, you don't have to figure this all out. You can really just let me take care of this. And I'll show you when it's time. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's great wisdom for people who may be in a difficult place right now. I like how you talked about, like, it's okay to have hope. It's not, but it's also not a point of doubt to say, it seems like this is the way it's going. I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, who said, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us.
But he might not.
But
Right.
even if he does not, you know, and so I think holding that, surrendering that open-handed, the outcome is unclear and unknown, but we know he could.
Right.
But even if he doesn't, we know that's like Paul's words, you know, to live as Christ and to die as gain.
Yeah.
Because the Christian truth, the reason we grieve differently, we grieve with hope, as 1 Thessalonians says, is because we understand there are two different kinds of healing. There's people with bladder cancer who get healed to walk more days on this earth. And there are people with bladder cancer who get healed and get to go home.
Yeah.
And they don't have bladder cancer anymore.
Right.
And they're with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so healing can look like a couple of different things.
Yeah.
And so I think the prayer of faith for a lot of us, and it's a big, mature prayer of faith, is, Lord, bring healing. And however you want to do that,
Yes.
we're great with that.
And just trusting that he is good
Yeah.
in all of it.
Yeah.
Even if it really hurts and it's really not what you wanted.
Yeah.
It's okay because he is good
Yeah.
and he is working something so beautiful.
Your generosity in sharing your story today highlights another key point to this, and you referenced it a moment ago. This isn't a discussion about your mom's story. This is everybody's story
Yeah.
with God, and your mom happened to be one of the principal characters in it because while he was working in her, he was working in your dad, he was working in you, he was working in Jason, figuring out how to be a husband,
Right.
and encouragement to you, you know, from a long way ago, working in your sister, all these, God's been moving and working in everybody,
Yeah.
you know, through all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And your mom is whole right now,
Yeah.
and some of the things she carried from the losses and from the tragedies, she's not carrying them anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe someday we can get to a point where we can celebrate that.
Well, you know, I spoke, you know, like I said, I spoke at her service, and one of the things I said was, my mom had a lot of questions. She had a lot of hurt that she carried.
Right.
And I said, now they're either answered or they don't even matter because she saw him face to face.
Yeah.
And she knew his full presence and his complete love for her. And there was no more doubt or why or I didn't deserve. There was no more of that.
Yeah. That's so good.
Oh my goodness. What a gift to know that is where she is right now.
And this is just my own personal kind of phrasing or wording around this, but I wonder if some of those people, they come to the presence of the Lord and there is this, no, leave that at the door.
Mm-hmm.
You get to come in and you don't have to bring in that with you.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
And sometimes we treat these things we carry as if they're eternal, and they're not.
They are not. And we don't have to carry them.
And you said, what if we were as close to the Lord now as, so it's not a big change then, but
Yeah.
what if we said he wants us to put some of these things down and we don't have to wait to heaven to do that?
We don't.
Yeah.
And I love that. And, you know, with, I didn't talk about my other brother that died. He died in 2009 from alcoholism at the age of 33. Now, you hardcore if you were destroyed your pancreas by the time you were 33.
Oh my.
And so he had a lot of struggle. And then with my sister's autoimmune, I'm just like, the pain that we carry will wreck us if we don't give it to the Father. And he has asked us to come to him, to abide in him.
Yeah.
And we don't bring all that stuff. If we do, we invite it in and he does something with it.
And it's not easy.
No.
we are not flippantly saying, "Oh, just let it go." Just lay it down. Sometimes it takes a long time.
It's a
sometimes it takes help. God has blessed the world with Christian counselors who are skilled at helping us to untangle. Some of the things.
When Jason and I were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, he said, "What do you want for our anniversary?" And instead of saying a cruise or a piece of furniture or a piece of jewelry, I said, "Counseling." And he was like, "What?" But it was such a beautiful time. I said, "We are fixing to move." And this is before I even knew, my mom was, this was happening with my mom. And I had just felt the Lord press this on me. And I knew we were moving toward this empty nest. And so the Lord used that in such a mighty way.
That's incredible.
Prepare us for all the things that were about to happen
the
that
Lord
we
knew.
didn't even know. Yeah, He knew. So
this may go down as one of the most interesting answers a spouse has ever given to what do you want for our 25th anniversary.
The look on his face, he was like, "What?" But I'm like, "Yeah, I know the person." So
you.
like, yeah.
Well, and the point of bringing up Christian counseling is if you are carrying something and you don't know how to lay it down,
right?
It may be well worth your time to talk with a pastor at your church, to get with a professional counselor, to find out if somebody else has already walked this road and they know how for you and God to lay it down together.
Yeah.
And the Lord has put this gift of Christian counseling into the world.
Yes.
And it's not an admission that you're broken. It's not an issue that you're crazy. It is, I'm going to get somebody who has studied and prayed and been called into the ministry of untangling the knotted up heart.
Yes.
And I want to spend some time with them and get some help. So,
and it was so helpful for Jason and I to do that. It was just amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
So what about for your 30th anniversary? What are you going to ask for?
Think about that.
Christie, you've been so good to bring so much truth and profound just welcome into your own story. Thank you for that. I know that a lot of people have listened and are going to be encouraged, and it's meaningful to a bunch of folks. So part of every podcast that we do, we invite the guest to answer a question. We call this our Dicey Questions segment.
Okay.
So there in front of you is a cup with some dice in it. So give it a good shake and just pour them out on the table. Okay. We'll figure out which question.
Okay, it is number 7.
Number seven. Okay. Well, this will just help us get to know Christie Taylor a little bit more.
Okay.
Since you didn't ask for this when your 25th anniversary came around, the question is just, what's the dream vacation location that if you could spend 2 full weeks paid by somebody else, where would you love to go?
Israel.
I love it.
I would love
How
to
come?
go to Israel. Well, it's such a beautiful country. And to walk where Jesus walked.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That would be so amazing.
Have you been?
I know. I've never been.
Well, we needed to calm down over there so we can take a church trip.
I wouldn't want to go right now. I must wait a little bit, wait for everything to settle down over there.
Yeah.
But I would love to go. I mean, I've studied his word so much in my life. And like you said earlier, talking about, my little country church, like that's where I heard all these Bible stories,
Yeah.
And so just to go and see where those things happened that would be so amazing.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get a chance to do that.
Maybe we will.
And to go walk in those places.
Yeah.
And hear those stories with a whole different perspective, from that. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. Is there anything else you want to add? Any other stories you want to say, or anything else you want to say to listeners today who may need some encouragement that their story's not over yet, that God is faithful?
He is so faithful. And I will just say, when we were talking earlier about the being still, it's not easy to get there, but once you taste it, once you see it, once you feel it, stay there.
Yeah.
And you can have that rest. He's inviting us to have that rest.
It's good.
And if you don't know how to do it, like I said earlier, just ask him. I don't know how to do that. And he'll show you.
Yeah.
He'll show you. He is so faithful.
I love it.
So your soul can rest in him.
Amen. Amen. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up today. Christie Taylor, we are so thankful for your opportunity to come and bless us and encourage us and to remind us that things are hard, but the story's not over and that God is always at work and he's caring and loving and we can lean on him. And even in the most difficult parts that we're going through, just being with him is special.
It's amazing.
And it's one of the greatest gifts. So thanks for being with us today. If you're a listener today and you're going through something hard, keep holding on.
Thanks for spending time with us today. We hope you've been encouraged. If things are rough right now, hang on. Your story isn't over. To learn more, visit kyledunn.org.